Good evening. Welcome to tonight's Monday Live. Just myself this evening. Stuart's away this week, so unfortunately with us sort of dovetailing time off, James being away, Stuart away, and me away next week, it's been a little bit thin on the ground for you, but thanks for those joining us this evening. Obviously Ryder Cup selections, the big topic of the day today, with Luke Donald announcing his picks today. I think no massive surprises. I think it was a tough call between, I think, your kind of Wallace, Straka and Fitzpatrick in the end, with obviously only 2 slots for those 3. And obviously Straka's couple of wins, I think, earlier in the year stood him in good stead. And yeah, as you've got to feel a bit for Matt Wallace. I think he's been so close on a couple of occasions that, you know, performing well going into it, narrowly missing out defending in Switzerland, and having been kind of really quite strong performances the last few weeks, to be yet again just pipped to it. I think he's going to be hurting quite badly from this one. But you can't argue against a major winner, Matt Fitzpatrick, going to a major championship venue. You know, a bit of a cauldron in New York. He won in Brookline. You know, it's the same kind of area, same kind of crowds, and I think, you know, it's really shaping into what should be a really close encounter. Personally, I think Keegan Bradley made the right decision. If I was on his team, I'd have wanted him playing. I think from a playing point of view, especially in a Ryder Cup match play, I think he's such a strong player. But obviously we've spoken to Monty about this, who's past captain himself. To manage the team and to do the job that's required to keep the players up, impossible to do if you're going to be out on course. And if you're going to pick yourself, you've got to play at least 2 or 3 matches, probably 3 matches really. And I think in the modern day Ryder Cup, and do that, I think he'd have been severely compromised. So the right decision for the bigger picture. But I think the Europeans will be quite glad he's not playing, because as a player, formidable in Ryder Cup, was very good at Medina, paired up with Mickelson brilliantly, and brings such energy to the team. So I think it's going to be really, really fascinating. So see, that's Ryder Cup selections done and dusted. So yeah, just can't wait for that to start now. I think in a few weeks' time, if we've got Wentworth, we've got the BMW PGA next week in Europe, the European Tour's flagship event, and all 12 of the European Ryder Cup players are going to be there, and then they're going to fly out to New York straight after that. So yeah, a couple of great weeks coming, and I can't wait for Ryder Cup. So going to start off with some questions. We've already got a few in. Thought we'd get cracking early. Been very kind to get the questions in already, so thanks for that. And say anything at all you want to ask. Be it, there's limited what I can do on technique, obviously without Stuart here, but in the equipment wise, we've now had some of the new products in the studio for a little while, the Ping i240 and the driving iron, the new Titleist irons. So any questions you have on any of those, if there's anything upcoming that I can let you know about, I will do. Mizuno launching the S1 irons soon, but fire in anything you like, and I will do my best to answer them. So start off with Peter Kendall. Hi guys, are you stocking the new Cleveland CBZ wedges or CBZ wedges? If so, can you hit the CBX4 and the CBZ and say what the differences are? Thank you. We don't have them yet. They will be with us soon. Have seen them. The sole profile is really very similar. So that three-way camber to the sole. There's a lot that's staying the same. The base design is very, very similar. Really, the mainstay of this is they're updating to the Z alloy material, or the Z alloy, if you're in the US. So matching the RTZ wedges, it's a material that they're really, really happy with, the way it's allowing them to put the tread and the milling on the face, the longevity of it, and the softness of it. So actually, you're going to gain a bit more feel from the CBZ wedges, but also gain a bit of feel, and in principle a little bit more grip. Again, in wet weather conditions, that's something they've been able to augment slightly as well, but it's mainly going to be about feel. CBX series have been really popular. We do a lot of those here, but I think actually having a material that's just a little bit nicer feel-wise is going to be a good change for them there. But that's the big difference with those. Chris Johnson, what profile driver shaft would generally fit a player, in brackets me, with a very short backswing and quick change of direction, swing speeds 100 to 105 on TrackMan? Thanks, love the channel, thank you very much. So if you're someone with a quick transition, quick change of direction, then what that actually means is if you've got a short, sharp change there, you're actually loading this upper section, the handle in a little bit more. If it's long and languid, it's a gradual build up of pace, then it's more kind of through the midsection. But if it's a short, sharp change, then where your hands are, that's where there's a lot of pressure on. So generally speaking, you tend to find if you're someone with a quick transition, a shorter length, there's not time to save anything. So a less heavy setup in terms of dead weight generally works, so that as you start down, the club comes with you so you can collect the ball, but you're generally going to prefer a profile with a stiffer grip to midsection. So something, if you take a Ventus TR, it's got that weave in the butt section that stabilizes it, and that's going to feel just like it's going to stay with you a little bit more. But potentially just don't go too heavy. At a kind of 100, 105, potentially around the kind of the mid-low 60s. If you play heavier than that, then chance of the club's going to get behind you, you're going to have to collect it. Possibly even, if we're looking at the Ventus range, the TR5 blue in a stiffer or an X, to not push the dead weight too far, but keep a lot of rigidity in the shaft and stability, which will ultimately give you a little bit more consistency of ball flight, probably feel a bit more controllable as well. It's not going to feel like it gets loose and away from you. So a stiffer mid to butt section definitely will help feel a little bit more stable. I'll go back to picking this up. So Mark Howard, hi guys, I was wondering if you could explain or demonstrate the difference of having the correct loft on a driver. Recently changed from a 10.5 to a 9 degree and have gained 15 to 20 yards of carry, thanks a million. So I may have seen this one come in before and have prepped a shaft and a couple of heads. So I'm going to go between a 9 degree and an 11 degree just to amplify the differences here. So I use an 8 to 9 degree driver head, and if you've got, it's interesting because actually both ways around, if you've got a lot of speed, then high spin is going to hurt you more, or too high a launch, too high a flight, because the ball gets too high and then it lands steep and then it dies. Whereas if you're a more kind of moderate or a lower speed player and you play too little loft, then the ball can't stay in the air, so you tend to lose carry. So either way round, the wrong loft can hurt your consistency of distance. So I'm going to start off here, let's change the setting on this, with an 11 degree head. This is same shaft that I play in my own gamer driver, the VA Composites, the Sinister 65. So with this one, let's tee that down a little bit. Too high a loft at my sort of speed, which is probably currently only going to be about 102, I'd have thought, but I've always hit a higher ball, so hence using I've got an 8 degree TSR3, and I'd probably be using a 9 degree in the GT3. But at 11 degree, we're going to see quite a high launch, but we should see a fairly high, actually my back's moving, a fairly high spin rate. So, should being the operative word. Got that a little out the toe, so that'll kill a bit of spin. Yeah, good miss strike. Really helped the demonstration there. So you can see launch angle 14.5, which for me is pretty high. But if I can find the middle of the face, we'll see the spin will go up quite a bit. Slightly out the heel, but you can see there kind of 3-1 on spin. Not swinging so well this evening. Let me give that one more. If I can actually strike it properly, we'll see it go very high. There we go. So launch angle wise 15. So not overly spin. In this instance, not overly spinny, but because it's launching high, I'm losing a bit of ball speed. So 146 efficiency, 14.5. If you're optimizing carry around those sort of numbers, that's probably not too bad because the spin hasn't gone that high, but then total distance is a little down on what I'd be hoping for. So a lot of the time if you go high on loft, then the spin rate for me, if that starts to weak into the 3000s, it starts to really stall the flight out. So you then carry ends up being okay. I'll lose sort of 5-10 yards carry, but then it lands and stops. So you can pull that total distance back about 10-15 yards. Whereas if I switch this onto the 9 degree, and these are both in standard position. So ball speed stays pretty good. Dropped probably 3 to 4 miles an hour ball speed over what would be optimal. But switch into the 9 degree head here, and essentially just more energy coming out forwards. So should get a bit more ball speed. but spins down, 158 ball speed. Actually, efficiency's not there, but because the flight's more forward, we've now picked up 5 yards of carry, another 10 yards of total. So whilst the launch angle's still there, because dynamically we got 2 degrees less loft on the club head, the spin comes down. So maintain ball speed, lose spin, the ball stays at my sort of speed, stays going forwards. Then you can creep out a few yards more carry, a few 5 yards, but then there's the extra 5 to 10 yards when it hits the ground as well. If that spin goes up at 3,000, then you're gaining 20, 25 yards for a 2 degree change in loft there. So, but we go to the other end of the scale, too little loft, not enough flight, doesn't stay in the air, falls out the sky, you lose carry. So it is important both ends of the spectrum, but for different reasons. At higher speed, spin becomes more important because it's that creates the drag and can stall the flight out. So too much spin creates a lot of drag on the ball, and it's like hitting a brick wall. At lower speeds, not enough height, not enough spin and launch angle means it falls out the sky and you lose carry distance. So both ends of the spectrum are important, but for just different reasons. Hope that helped. And sorry, my swing's not so good this evening. Simon Muggleton, quick question on RTZ Adapt 8 bounce wedge. Is that just their way of saying high toe? Did TaylorMade have the rights to the name? So there will be some, I guess, of legal issues surrounding model names and usages, patents, not actually patents, sorry, but copyright on some of the terminology. So they wouldn't be able to just copy another brand's name for the wedge. So the Adapt series, the Adapt is a little bit on the sole shape, but they do take the grooves all the way out to the toe. And the Adapt is also about the curvature of the sole. So it's a very versatile sole shape, but essentially, yeah, it is a high toe style clubhead where there's a little bit more peak on the toe. The grooves go all the way to the top, and it's designed for, as you open the club up, as you work the club underneath. You catch it higher on the face, there are grooves all the way out to that top corner. So in principle, wherever you strike it on the face, you're getting as much grip and spin control as possible. I'm just going to make sure that there isn't an element of that I haven't answered. But yeah, essentially, yes, it is their version of high toe, just as Callaway, they've got a version of or have had a version of the high toe in the past as well. A lot of the wedge brands are keeping the grooves going all the way out onto the toe, and some of them more forgiving clubs as well. Cobra have done it on their snakebite wedges on the X series. So it's something that we're seeing more and more across the brands. Titleist haven't done it. That's not something they feel they need to do. Same with Mizuno, but an awful lot are doing that. Ian Murgatroyd, evening boss, that's very kind of you. Are the AI 150 irons as good as Callaway say they are? They look a bit small. So they are designed to be more compact, more towards the pro style head. I'm not certain about them. They are good for ball speed, and actually that's one of the things that the Apex Pro lacked, was a bit of ball speed and punch, and the most recent one. And I think the problem was there was then a big gap to the AI 200 from a ball speed and a shot strength point of view. So the previous Pro was just a bit weak, but it maintained launch and spin. The AI 150, much better for ball speed. It's a much stronger head, but I think personally for me, ball flight spin is back too close to the AI 200. It seems like they're kind of flitting too far from one side to the other in terms of getting a balance of performance. I don't think the balance of performance it's not where I would like to see it. I'd love to see the extra ball speed, but retain a chunk of the launch and spin that they had in the Apex Pro. That's the one club that they're missing in their range. They've had one or other, but not the best of both since the 2019 Apex Pros. Go back a couple of models, they had it in a great sweet spot, and I think they just haven't quite, for me, they haven't quite got it right. There are going to be players it's going to suit perfectly, but in terms of the balance across their range, I don't think it's quite there personally. Shane Delmo, hi Simon, do you have any knowledge of the graphite design Ruane, is that the right way of pronouncing it? Graphite iron shafts, thank you. And we did go over them with Graphite Design at the trade show earlier in the year, and there's some demos coming out into our system pretty shortly. Ruane, that's the way to pronounce them, sorry, Ruane. Essentially, something with a little bit more height in the design. So the design have a little bit more of a responsive tip, but a stiffer midsection, if I remember correctly. But I think from a progression point of view, they're designed to give a bit more stability short iron, more launch in the longer irons, and sort of bridge, I guess, more towards a stronger player profile. But it's something that I would need to just double check on all the specs, having been several months since we last saw them. So we've got them coming into the demo system very soon, but I'd need to just mug up a little bit on the exact design principles of them once we get them in. But I remember thinking that they'd be quite a nice addition to the range. I think the Tour ADs can, in the lighter weights, often get a little bit loose, but then they get very stout in the heavier weights. So this seems like a really nice balance of shaft profile that offers something a little bit different to the Tour ADs from Graphite Design. Stephen Johnson, welcome back, Simon. Thank you very much. Can you hit KBS Light $105X? Well, we've got the KBS Tour Light 105X. I can certainly hit versus 115R Plus. Feel, launch, and weight difference. Thanks. I shall grab those for you the dollar taper. So dollar taper in the lights, we currently haven't added into that range simply because they're having so many options. The dollar tapers in the heavier weights we have, the lights because it covers off where the Tour V, the Tour Light are. That's just one model that we haven't bought into all of our demo racks, so I can't actually compare those two. They have so many models that you have to draw a line somewhere, and the dollar taper light was the one that we drew the line at. So I can't actually hit both of those for you, I'm afraid. Sorry about that. Mark Howard should add swing speed. Should add swing speed around 104, 105. This was to the question on loft changes earlier. So you should see a similar thing to me, that your spin would have gone through the roof with a higher loft, and going to the 9 just made the flight much more efficient, would gain you a bit of ball speed, hence the 20-odd yard distance gap, 15, 20 yards that you've gained. So getting that spin or flight into a much more efficient window definitely would help you massively there. Golf Nerd 3, does it make sense to keep dead weight of clubs just under the ideal weight to factor in fatigue over the course of a round, especially for people playing in very hot weather? Interesting concept that I think you can fit either side of the line. You've got kind of an ideal weight. I guess that depends on what you're trying to prioritize from the fitting side of things. So for a stronger play, you often fit, I say stronger, you're fitting more of a pro style or a kind of a low single digit handicap, someone sort of physically very able, you'd fit to the stronger end of things so that they can commit with a shot and not having to back off of it. And I guess if you're a lower handicap or a kind of lower handicap index of a higher standard player, then I wouldn't be overly worried, maybe back end of a 36 hole, but I wouldn't be overly worried about fatigue at the back of 18 holes, because otherwise you compromise the front end of the round too much. Having said that, if you're someone who does struggle late on the round, then that's something within the fitting to be conscious of and to let your fitter know and say, actually, you know what, I tire at the back end of the round, I'm playing out in 38 degrees heat, high humidity, it's really tiring. So whilst I need to make sure I can still use the clubs at the back end of the round, and so all those things kind of do go into what I call the melting pot of the conversation throughout a fit, of making sure that you're conscious of that drop off at the back end of a round. Some of the heat we've had here this summer has been really quite high. It's been very dry, and yeah, I think there are certain things that as a player, it's important that you, if you're having a fitting, that you tell someone about, right, this is something that I've noticed on course and I'm conscious of. There are so many aspects to the performance that the fitter's going to be looking at. Just little nuggets of information like that can make a big difference to saying, okay, well, let's just tone it back fractionally. But having said that, it would only have to be a very small amount. You wouldn't have to make, for example, a 10-gram change in shaft weight to account for the back end of a round. You're literally looking at, it might be a soft step. It could be something literally as simple as just make it a hair easier to get the very, very best out of, rather than having to be full on. But very, very valid point you make there. Especially, say, we're getting hotter summers here, and there are places you're playing in, Texas or California or Florida or something like that, or UAE. It gets exceptionally hot, and that's definitely a consideration for sure. But great point. Tony Bythway, hi Simon, for a 5 hybrid replacing a 4 iron that I want to play and feel similar to my irons, which is in a steel fibre 110, would you recommend a steel fibre 80 or 70 or not a good idea, and why. So if you're wanting it to be more aligned to your irons, then certainly into the hybrid you'd often go a little bit lighter. So if you're in the 110, if you wanted the shaft length more similar to your irons, you might actually think about the 95. If you're just wanting the head to give you more forgiveness and more height, then you may not have to drop as much weight as, like, going down to the 75 is quite a big drop. So if you're in 110 in irons, we'd probably be looking at more the 95 or the 80 would be far enough to go on weight. I think the 80 is probably on the lower end of where I would go to. The 70, the I-70, which is more 74, 75 grams, I think you're probably going a little bit too light there. As much as the structure of the shaft will match and it will feel pretty stable, I think it's going to be too far away from your irons. So if you're replacing, I think the 5 hybrid, replacing the 4 iron, it's on the longer end. So it depends how much of a step off your irons you want it to be. If it's more head giving you forgiveness and you want it to feel similar to your irons, then go the 95, but probably go into the regular. If you want a little bit more speed and a little more help from the club, then the 85 is a good baseline to go with. Philly Central, hi all. Thoughts on lessons using an indoor sim at a golf club with Pro V1 versus an outdoor covered range environment with range balls, especially going into or during winter. So the one thing that, and this might surprise you slightly, I actually have a huge value if I'm working on something with my swing at not seeing ball flight. Because if I'm working on something with my own swing, there are certain key numbers, data points that I would look at. So I'd be looking at, attack angle, path, face to path, maybe strike point. But depending on what I'm working on, if it's a technique thing, if I'm trying to get the swing line or delivery ironed out, actually, if there's a key feel or a key move I'm trying to bed in, I'm doing it with a video camera and the data. So actually the ball flight, if I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing with the swing, the ball flight's going to take care of itself. And actually sometimes the ball flight can get you a little bit off track, I think. And I know for me, if I'm working on my swing and a technique change, I don't want to get involved in where the ball's going. I actually want to work out, am I making the correct move? Because ultimately, if you're making the correct move and you're doing the reps and the tolerances on the path or face to path or angle of attack number, whatever it is that you're working on, are good, then the results will come out. But ultimately, you've got to change your patterns. You're changing some of the compensations, some of the delivery numbers, what your hands are doing, the feels. You've got to give yourself time to bed that in. And for me, playing with ball flight can get you a little bit, I think, can actually hurt your confidence. You can be striving to hit these perfect shots that you're just not going to do for a while. So actually just say, I like to practice a swing change or technique change into the winter with a simulator, maybe even just with the data numbers, and feel the quality of contact and what feel and movement pattern am I working on, and just make sure that I'm not getting my path and delivery off key too much. Because by the time you bedded that in and make it feel less strange, the ball flight should have sorted itself out. So actually shot shape and dispersion will improve as you get those numbers dialed in. So personally, I like to do my swing work without seeing ball flight on the range. I hope that's helpful. September 79:17 p.m. or 79:17 p.m. Would it be normal to see lower club head speed indoors compared to outdoor? That's an interesting point. Sometimes the answer is both. I see players in the fitting bay who free it up more because there's no consequence. You've even got to go trudging off into the trees to find your ball. So some players can free it up more in a simulator or in a practice. Some players actually react to having a specific target and commit a little bit more. I know I do a little bit with my driver. So it can go both ways. I think if you're target oriented, you can become more positive when you've got a definite target. And say others just free it up a little bit more. So the answer is yes, but it can go both ways. The left rough, a couple of questions. I'll see if I can combine them. Is there much of a head weight difference between ZXi7 and Pro 243, which is better off a slight heel miss? The answer is yes. ZXi7s have gone up a little bit in weight this series, and the Mizuno irons sit on the lighter side of the standard spectrum. So there's about a 4 gram weight difference or so on average, I would say. Which is better on a slight heel miss? Marginal, but I would say potentially the Srixon, without having the kind of cavity, the lighter face material in it, that actually you tend to see more the sweet spot more towards the toe in that kind of scenario. So for a slight heel miss, I would err to a ZXi7 versus a 243. And then the second half of the second question was, I was trying my wedges bent flat, but I've gotten a lot of toe strikes. Is that common for too flat? So it can be if the toe's getting in, if you've got it noticeably too flat, the toe's getting into the dirt, if it's holding it, then what happens is it can kind of slip the contact out onto that toe side. But you're also going to notice it in your divot patterns as well, and you're likely to see it from a shot pattern point of view. It's going to go off a little bit more to the right as well. So depending on how much you flatten them off, I would look at your divot patterns, look at your shot pattern. If the toe deep and the ball's going right, then just rein it back a little bit. But it can get the toe catching. It can work the face a little bit open because it's contacting the ground more. So it takes a little bit more of the strike and stalls it out, rides it up the face. It can pop the flight up a little bit as well. But yeah, look at your shot pattern, your divot pattern, and rein it back a little bit if that is the case. Mark Blast 49, hi, so I've been playing C-taper 120s for the last 15 years, but now looking for a higher ball flight without having too much spin, thus losing carry distance. Any shaft recommendations? So the shaft won't, it's not going to be the C-tapers will hit it out at kind of that flight and another shaft's going to get it up there. You'd have to make a vast change in bend profile from that standpoint. I would say to make enough of a change but without losing your timing, if you hit them well, then a shaft that will help them flight a little bit. It's worth testing against the Modus 120 in a stiff. That'll be at kind of 114, 115 grams. So we'll feel a little bit easier, should help a little bit with ball flight. It's potentially, I mean, the Project X Red, you're dropping a reason, but you've got to go down to 110 grams to make a noticeable change. Just thinking through shafts. It's interesting because if you've been hitting them well and have dialed them in, the dispersion's good, then you don't want to change the shaft by much. Otherwise, you're going to lose your timing and lose the strike and lose that quality of shot. So I would say, the Modus aren't a high spin shaft. I would probably go to that first and see how much difference that makes. Being a bit light will let you get the club out in front of you a bit more, may allow you just to shallow out a little bit and deliver a little bit more loft. And if you're doing it that way, then you shouldn't see lots of spin go onto it. But it might be, depending on what ball you're using, it might be that the ball can help you as much, if not more, than the shaft. So look at the ball type as well. Maybe drop me a comment and let me know what ball you're playing, and I'll see if there's one that might well help with the flight too. This is a great name. Stiletto. Haven't seen that before, so thank you for joining on. It's a great handle. I play a downlands course which has been very hard and fast. I bet this summer that's been like a lynx. My T200 irons seem to perform better on softer course conditions. Is there any adjustment I can do? So a little bit of a wider sole, and so therefore when the course you play, a downland course, is like rock in summer, so they are going to bounce a little bit more. Ultimately, the problem is then you're going to get wet, softer conditions in winter, and then they'll perform really well. So it's always a bit of an interesting one as to what to do. You could shallow out delivery slightly and try and pick it a little bit more, but then you're having to change your action a little bit. Ultimately, a slightly more moderated sole width is likely to help you more than anything else. However, are you going to hurt the performance when it gets soft in winter? So it's an interesting one. Depending on how efficient the performance is with it, it's something that if you can just essentially you can make sure you're getting ball first, then if the club head's then interacting with the turf, the ball's already gone. So it may well be a low point thing. Maybe put the ball back in your stance just a little bit on firmer conditions to make sure that back edge can't kick it back up into the back of the ball. But there's always that pro and con of firm versus soft, and UK conditions we get are so extreme that you're trying to find the best compromise maybe in both extremes. and that may be a slight compromise in both ends to get the best all-round performance. So slightly difficult one, that. Tony, by the way, exactly what I want it for: forgiveness, height, consistency, and fractionally longer than the standard 4-iron length, maybe half an inch. So we'll look on the heavy end. Yeah, I think the I-95 is probably a good shout for that for you, Tony. Yeah. Mark Howard, what club would you recommend to change from a 4-iron, don't play it enough and too inconsistent, had a 4 hybrid and didn't really like it? Would I just be better off persevering and getting a lesson? Well, lessons are never a bad idea, but 4-irons are hard to hit. So hybrids are really tricky creatures, and that if you get the head style wrong, so the head style is really important depending on how you deliver the club head, strike point, so they can make a massive difference to consistency of contact and flight. Hybrids are the most sensitive to little changes in setup of any of the clubs that we play. Quite why, I'm not 100% certain, but when you get them right, they're someone's favourite club, and if they're slightly off, they can just be left in the bag. So they are a tricky so-and-so to fit and to get nailed on. So it may just be that you got the hybrid setup slightly off. Depending on what 4-iron you're playing, if it's not very forgiving, go to a more forgiving head. Go to one of the driving iron style heads where you're gaining forgiveness, you're gaining ball speed off the face, should pick the flight up a little bit more. So if you're in a tightless head in a T100 and T150, try the U505. If you're in, one of the Strixon irons, go the ZXIU. There are some heads that are going to make them more forgiving, gain a bit of ball speed, and that may be the better way to go than a hybrid club, and that way you can have it set up like your irons, just with a much more forgiving head, depending on what you're already using. So try that one out maybe. Eric Wallace, hi Simon, I play Axiom 105 shafts in my irons, Axiom 105 stiff shafts in my irons, and love the feel. Looking into getting a 4 utility iron. Any shaft ideas to keep a similar feel? Maybe drop down to a 95 Axiom. Any other ideas? Certainly the 95 Axiom is a great idea, and it's great that they've added that, and that's coming in. Well, it's that one coming in. They're adding in a heavier one. So they did a 105, they're adding in a 115. 95 should be coming, it's the one that they should have added first. But otherwise there are some driving iron shafts of that weight. Graphite Design do one, Acra do one as well. So, but I would say if you can get hold of the 95 Axiom, then use that, because that's going to keep the feel, keep the materials that you're used to, keep that continuity of setup and balance point. But add that one in, that would be the natural one to go to for sure. Paul Clanner, quick question as you're soloing. What percentage is club face to path swing? I'm assuming you mean by that what percentage of face angle to path to get it back online. So generally speaking, 50% to 65%. So if you're 4 degrees in to out from your path, and this is assuming I've interpreted the question correctly, if you're 4 in to out, then you want the face 2.5 degrees closed. That will bring it back to target. If you're 6 degrees in to out or out to in, then you want it around 4 degrees. If you're parity, if you're 6 and 6, then you're gonna overshape it. So generally speaking, 50 to 65% would be the marker that I'd be looking for, and then you should have a nice consistent shot shape. But if your path's getting more than 3 or 4 degrees offline, prioritize that, I would first. September 7917 PM. Is it possible to bend the lie angle on the U505 driving iron? It's a cast body as far as I know. It is, but actually this range have been easier to move than previous models. So it's definitely doable up to a couple of degrees, but again, just be slightly careful when you go to move them. Just make sure that you're being sympathetic to the club and they should move for you. But definitely they're the best to move that I've known so far. Paul M, hi Simon, given they are similar in size, what would make someone choose Mizuno 925 Hot Metal Pro over 925 Forged? Will you get more control with the forged irons? So the Hot Metal Pro, it's a cast frame, it's a stiffer frame, which puts more energy back into the face. The Hot Metal Pro, the hot metal bit is the bit that signifies they're more distance oriented. The Forged are a lovely head. They're definitely, doing well with them this year. I think they've done really well to kind of bridge that gap of something that feels a little bit softer with a bit of forgiveness. And there's still pretty solid ball speed off them, but you're going to see a flatter spin and more ball speed, more of a kind of punchy ball flight out of the Hot Metal Pro than you will the 925 Forged. So if your priority is distance, then the Hot Metal Pro will give you a hair more. If your priority is a little bit more control and consistency, then 925 Forged. But you know, both good heads, but the Forged they've done a really good job at keeping the softer feel on that head this year, in my opinion. Tony Bythway, thoughts on Fitzpatrick as a pick for Bethpage given his dismal Ryder Cup record? I do agree. I think it's an interesting one, this, because whilst he's won a major and he's played well in the States and you know, he's been a global player now for a few years, his Ryder Cup record is not good. Hazeltine wasn't great, and you know, whilst everyone in the European team won a point last time out, it still wasn't wonderful. I think it's a tough one. I think you could have found plenty of arguments for Matt Wallace. I know there were a lot of calls for Marco Penge. For me, Penge is just still a little bit green around the gills to take to a New York Ryder Cup. I think to be in that scenario in your first or second year out on tour, first year really kind of performing at that level, to go into a proper bear pit in New York was probably a little too much. I think there is an element of, you know, whether it's playing more in the US, Fitzpatrick, you know, it's a major championship course, and he is on form. He is playing noticeably better at the moment. So is Matt Wallace. I just wonder whether there's an element of an away cup, whether that tried and tested element is a comfort blanket that Luke Donald's gone back to. I wasn't able to listen to the chats that they had on Sky Sports earlier when they were announcing the team, so he may well have answered some of that in that. But for me, I think it's gone back to what they know, and someone who they know has performed in the States, won a major just around the corner in Boston. I think there's a safety net there. And the guy can putt, you know, and Ryder Cups are all about, you know, generally speaking, the team that putts best wins. And his partnership with Rory last time out, that was pretty good. They certainly gelled a couple of times together. So that would be my guess is why he got the nod versus Matt Wallace. But I think it's going to be a cracking. I think it's going to be a cracking set of matches this time around. I think on paper the Europeans I think are slightly stronger, not just because I'm British. But I think then you've got home advantage for the US, which levels it off. I think at Whistling Straits, the US just were unbelievable. They had a great team. They played brilliantly and just wiped the floor with us. Italy was a shame actually for the tournament that the US got off to a slower start, because it was kind of over after day one. I think this could be a really epic set of matches, and I hope it's really, really close. Philly Central, currently hit my 3-wood straighter and almost as long as my driver. Driver's great when I hit it well, but frequently difficult to control from high right to very low left hook. Both are stiff shaft. So the one thing to have a look at is driver shaft lengths have sort of crept back to being a little bit longer again. So, you know, average length on tour is no longer than 45 degrees, 45 inches. It's actually a little bit less and has been for a long time now. But retail drivers are sat up at 45.5 to 46 inches because on a test robot, it goes quicker and goes further. But you're asking a player of much less ability to hit a longer driver than the pros play. So one thing that I would check out is the length and the swing weight of your driver and the length and swing weight of your 3-wood. Your 3-wood standard length, I would say, is 43 inches. We often build a bit shorter. But if the driver is over 45 inches, and if the swing weight then starts to creep heavier, then that's probably where the issue lies. So just make sure the driver's not overly long, and you know, if it is, trim it down. Just be conscious of where the swing weight goes. For every half inch you take off, you'll drop 3 or 4 points. But actually, to keep it, you know, swinging similarly, you need to be careful of not going too light. So just be conscious of where that sits. If your 3-wood's 43 inches in D2 and you hit it well, then 45 and around D2 is not a bad start point for the driver. If it's up at 45.5 and D5, that's probably where the problem lies. Philly Central, could it be driver shaft length, or is it too heavy for me? Possibly. So I think check length out first, and then, you know, if the shaft weight in your driver is the same as your 3-wood, then it probably is slightly heavy, because it's longer and therefore you've got more shaft. It's going to be heavier in actual weight. But if you're, say, for example, a 55 in the driver and a 65 in the fairway, it won't be shaft weight, it will probably be the length. Mark Blast 49, follow-up play Chrome Tour X. So let me just go back to, so Chrome Tour, so the Chrome Tour X is the higher spinning ball. So it may be that if you go to a slightly more responsive shaft that feels a bit more user-friendly and flights it a bit more, you might find the Chrome Tour stops the spin getting up because that'll drop it about 400 or 500 revs. So have a look at that as an option, depending on what you find gives you the responsiveness and the height you want from the iron shaft. Look at where the spin goes, and if you want to bring that spin back down 300 to 500 revs, then switch to the Chrome Tour. And yes, launch angle might come back down fractionally, but it'll get the spin back under control, and that would be one way of managing it, getting noticeably more performance out of the iron shaft, but keeping the spin in check as well. But thank you for following up on that. Golf Nerd 3, do you factor in players' preferred grip weight when fitting shaft weight, i.e. plus 7 gram shaft weight? If the player likes a minus 7 gram, then standard grip. Shaft weight. Just asking about total weight, not swing weight. So grip weight is definitely key to factor in. So when we're testing, we'll start with a pretty neutral grip weight. So it's something where when we're going through the initial data capture, looking at someone's clubs, we'll look at what the components are, what their setup is, what grip type they're using and size. And then that will feed into, so actually my fitting this morning plays Lamkin oversized crossline grips. They're a 76, 77 gram dead weight of grip. Now a standard grip weight is 50 to 53 grams. So he'd been encouraged to go into oversized grips, which actually was hurting his, so not hurting from a pain point of view, but was hampering the actual pattern and the flow through the ball, was getting a little locked out and lifting the handle up. And so it lost some flow to his hand and arm action, and grip and glove wise he's a standard sort of medium grip, so didn't need in theory a large grip, but the principle of the big grip was to stop his hands flipping. What it had then done is it had back weighted too much, lost the feel of the club head, so he flipped it even more because it made the club heavy. So by going down to a more standard grip weight, we then got the handle out in front and got timing and strike better. So grip weight is definitely really key to take into account during the fitting. And from a dead weight point of view, what you wouldn't want to do is go heavier shaft and a really light grip. Heavier shaft? Yeah, so what you don't want to do is you don't want to use a really light grip to try to increase swing weight, because actually it kind of doesn't quite work. Because you're losing weight, it doesn't swing the same. Swing weight's a funny number in that it isn't absolute. So if you change grip weight or shaft weight, shaft length, then what it means, that C9, D2, D6 number, always needs interpreting based on what the components are. So if you use like the old Tour Velvet 25 grips, the really light 25 gram grips, you'd send the swing weight up from D2 to D5, but it wouldn't actually swing as heavy as that. So grip weight is important, and certainly we find very rarely can someone handle going an extra 10 grams if you're going to a mid-size, for example, or an oversized grip going 10, 15 grams heavier, because you've then got to weight the head up to keep the feel of the head. So it ramps up quite a lot. So it is a major consideration, but it is a case of dynamically testing and just making sure that, actually my afternoon fit, he played the +4 multi-compound mid-sizes, and whilst the club swung really well with the standard weight mid-size on, adding the extra weight for him didn't create a negative. So you're always trying to mix preference and the practicality of the way the club swings. For a lot of players, adding the extra 10 grams to the grip ruins the way the club swings, but for some players it's absolutely fine. So yes, it is a consideration. Yes, it's something that we definitely want to take into account when we're fitting for total weight. And then the way that you balance the club up, but it will affect some players more than others, which is a very long-winded way of saying yes. Stephen Johnson, I'm back. Can you hit Strixon ZXIU versus Titleist U505, both 3 driving irons with a graphite design shaft of your choice? I certainly can. Bear with me one moment whilst I get that. Right, and I'm going to get the next question, the Wilson CB and the T100 at the same time. So bear with me 1 minute whilst I do that. CB T100. And make sure I get the correct heads for the it's U505 and ZXI. what I'm going to do with the U505 and the ZXIU is we've got the 2 irons and the 4 irons in both heads. So because we can move them and bend them a little bit, rather than having a lot of heads on the rack, we've kind of spread them out. So I will hit the 2 in both of them for you, because it's still going to give you the relative comparison. And then I've got the Wilson, the Titleist T100 heads as well for the next question. So, right. Thank you, by the way, for all the questions. You're making my solo this evening by sending in loads of questions. It makes it a lot easier because I can just keep answering them. So thank you very much indeed. So I used these heads a little earlier, so I know with my last fit, so I know they're actually the same loft. So, so in terms of performance, what I've generally found, I mean, the U505 this year is a neater head shape, but it's definitely it's a little bit more user-friendly. It just feels better across the face. The Strixon heads, let's get the swing going. If I hit a 2 on. Strixon heads have generally felt a little bit softer, but this one is a bit of a stronger flight than they've been in the past. So if I hit the Strixon first, a little lower on the face, but it doesn't have that kind of tinniness strike-wise that some of the other heads have, that kind of hollow clankiness to it. It's still got a bit of softness off the face there. So it's a little low on the face. Let's see if I can get one really clean. So half a groove low maybe, but you know, 10, 11 launch, 3 to 3.6 on spin, but definitely keeps the flight down and forwards a little bit. Now what I would be expecting from the U505 isn't necessarily that much more spin, but I would be expecting a little bit more launch. So switch that over. So both the scale of the heads isn't dissimilar to look at. They've neatened up the Titleist head somewhat, has maybe a little bit more offset to it. So a harder feel, and actually kind of because there's potentially a little bit more tungsten in the bottom, just picked it up a little bit more. It's 2/3 of a degree, but it's actually less spin. So it's picked the ball up a little bit more. So if you're someone who picks it slightly more, then the U505 is a good head. It's designed to give you that little bit more flight. But, you know, just over 11 launch, but the spin's pretty strong. And this is something with the T350 iron we've seen, where they've gone noticeably more weight in the bottom of the head. You know, as an off-the-turf club, very, very good for picking that ball up and getting into the bottom of the ball there. You know, if anything, a little easier than the Strixon head for that. But the spin's pretty low. So by putting more mass down the bottom, it pulls a sweet spot down, but means you strike it above the CG quadrant of the head more, which means it gears spin off. So it actually produces, this and the 350 iron are pretty cannon-like. So quite a strong performance off that head. And then the next question, which was from the left rough. We have a Wilson CB to hit. Where does it sit in terms of flight and spin, like a T100 question mark? So, gonna hit T100 for you first, just to get that reference marker. Reasonable hit. Little bit pulled there, so it's taking a bit of flight off. I'm going to do one more. That's just going to shut the face down, it's just going to affect the flight a little bit. Such a bad hit, sorry. Oh dear. That's a ropey one. Get a solid hit in. 3rd time lucky. There we go, that's a bit more solid. So 15 launch, 5-1 spin, very, very neutral, mid-launch, mid-spin. So one of the things with the Wilson heads that I must say is that they are a little heavier than a lot, particularly the Dyna Forged, the more forgiving head, is really pretty weighty, and the CB is not quite as much, but it's kind of up there with it as well. It's quite a strong head weight, so they are going to be hard to get swing weight dialed in for some players who don't need a heavier swing weight. So nice compact, it's a lovely head shape actually. Nice soft feel. 15.7 launch, 5.4 on spin. So, you know, broadly speaking, for kind of half a degree of launch, a couple of hundred revs of spin, pretty darn similar. You know, neither's got a lot of tech in. The Titleist in the 4 and the 3 iron and the T100 does. It gets a bit more ball speed. But anything where there's less tech, you actually get a little bit more spin. So CB's a very mid-launch, mid-spin head. T100, similar again, a bit more forgiving the T100 because you've got the tungsten heel and toe. But from a flight point of view, pretty similar. So you shouldn't see big differences between them, but the Wilson will feel softer. Right, so we've got 10 minutes to go. So where are we here now? This is Jerry Markham. Jerry, how are you? Dropped 4.5 hybrids, gone to ping G400 crossover, much better. So the 400 crossover is a sort of a driving iron style club. So it kind of crosses over between an iron and a hybrid. And for some players, hybrids can pop the ball up a little bit too much, but they can be a little bit draw biased. So some of the brands are working on getting them away from being draw biased. Certainly the current pings, as you go down in loft, they become more and more and more neutral to even fade bias slightly in the 2 hybrid and the 17 degrees. So, but for some players, I've never been a hybrid player. I could just about make one work now, but for years and years, I just could never get consistent flight out of them. I've always been a driving iron player. Not you'd believe it from some of the strikes earlier, but a 5-wood or the driving iron suit me. I'm more comfortable with, but I've always got more consistency out of. So if that, from a strike point, if you squeeze it a little bit more, then the crossover, because it allows you to play it like an iron, may as well just give you a better quality of strike, more consistency of flight. I don't know how to pronounce this one. I guess. Are there any particular irons which give lots of forgiveness on toe strikes, gaming Mizuno MP52s and ball falls out of the sky on toe strikes? So yes, the irons where they've got a bit of mass behind the toe side. So actually this is where Titleist have done well, where they've got the split mass, split tungsten. They've got a lump of high density tungsten behind the toe end, and that just means there's a bit more momentum there. Easy for me to say. So generally speaking, they've been pretty good on a slight toe strike. Your MP52s, whilst they're a beautiful club head, they're the ones with a little cutaway in the back and the sort of join in the middle. Were a lovely head, but there isn't any extra weight there. All they've done is move weight back from the face. So in theory, it makes it a bit more forgiving off centre, but anything with a bit of high density tungsten in the toe is going to give you that little bit more stability, and the more that's there, the more stability you're going to get. But you actually now don't have to go to something big and clunky to get quite a bit of forgiveness. So certainly look at, pinging the I240, that's got a tungsten slug in the toe. Titleist, the T100, T150, there's a lot more performance you can get. Strixon in their kind of 7 iron up. You haven't got to go actually hollow bodied, but multi-material construction. They've got a bit of tungsten in the toe side as well in the ZX7s. So potentially take a look at those, and one of those will definitely give you noticeably better performance. Martin Wheatley, hi Simon, is it a good starting place for swing weight around the 6 iron? Was fitted by Mark for my irons. Is it a good starting place for swing weight around the 6 iron? Not sure I quite understand the nature of the question there. Oh, driver. Oh, sorry. Sorry for the driver. I've just seen the second half. Yeah, interestingly enough, if you're not a longer than standard short, if you're pretty much a standard length, one of the things over the years that we've often found, and a physics dean would tell me why, but 6 iron and driver swing weights are often very close. So yes, 6 iron swing weight for your driver is often a really good start point, and it often isn't far away from there. So yeah, no, good point there. September 7917 7 p.m. Can we do a ball test with all the premium low spin balls to see which one has more spin for approach shots? Currently trying out the Callaway Triple Diamond, Z-Star XV and Left Dash. Something that we'll endeavour to do over the coming weeks. So yeah, we'll look at doing a little bit more ball tests. Ball tests take up a heck of a lot of time when you're covering all the main brands. But if it's for the low spin balls, then yep, I will make a note for myself to do that for you. We'll try and get that done over the next few weeks if I can. But I've often seen, let me see, this is where my new Pro V1 X is a higher spin ball. What would I expect to be the case for the low spin balls for spin? I'm going to make a prediction that maybe the Srixons might spin a little bit more, but we shall see. We shall see. I might be completely wrong. Peter Kendall, what's the difference between steel fibre shaft and other types of shafts? So the steel fibre, the structure is a graphite core, and then there's 50 miles of steel filament wrapped around the outside. So the principle of that does is that they've done it to perimeter weight the shaft, essentially. It moves the centre of gravity of the shaft to the outsides of it. Ultimately, it's also, you've got a very, very stable core, but then that filament around the outside just helps with a little bit of feedback. Again, it's all to do with stopping the shaft overling, getting consistency from how it bends and loads, energy transfer down the shaft. But that multi-material construction has just meant that you're trying to match the best of both. The steel side of things from a bit of, I guess it's a steel shaft at the same weight will have more feel. Now the steel fibres are interesting because it's not a layer of steel, it's steel filament wrapped. So they're a very stable feeling shaft relative to weight. So I think that's where they're pretty unique. For a lot of players, there's not a huge amount of feel off of them, and that's been the one criticism of them over the years. But they're very stable tip, and they're generally a little bit lower spin than other composite shafts of the same weight. Stu Brister, evening Stu, hope you're well. Thoughts on the Diamana RB as a fairway shaft for someone who struggles with the rights? Cheers, Stu. So the Diamana range this year, and the blue board and the red board in particular, aren't overly tip heavy. In terms of struggling with the rights or not, the shaft profile isn't going to affect that. It's not like the tip end of the shaft lassos the toe around and squares it off. That's going to be more about how the weight and the balance affect your delivery pattern. But as a fairway shaft, yeah, very smooth feeling, uses the tip nicely. The new Diamana range, the kind of, I think, 6th gen now, 6th, 7th gen, we've had a lot of success with really nice series this year, so definitely a good fairway shaft there. Golf Nerd 3, what's your favourite MP iron from the early to mid 2000s? Ooh, early to mid 2000s, I'm going to say, I think the prettiest one was the MP32. So I'm going to say, MP33 was a classic braid, but I think MP32, that little bit of a cutaway in the middle, yeah, that was very pretty. There may be a video following from me and one of the other fitters fairly soon talking about 1990s prot clubs. So if you like that kind of conversation about going over kind of old golf clubs, there will be something coming out fairly soon, I would have thought. But yeah, to me, they were just a beautiful set of irons. Philly Central, my irons are 770 with KBS Tour C-Table 120. Is there a system for matching hybrid 3-wood and driver shafts? Ultimately, you just got to test them. It sounds a bit cliche as to what we do, but my iron shafts are a totally different balance profile to my driver shaft. So I deliver them slightly different ways, but you wouldn't necessarily predict me having a more tip-heavy driver shaft, tip-stiff driver shaft than a more neutrally weighted. I play a CT115 Oban in my irons, which is really neutral. It's not back-weighted, but it's definitely not tip-weighted. And I play a VA Composite Sinister 65 in my driver, which you wouldn't put those two together as a natural. So ultimately, you've just got to find out what works best. If you can get to somewhere to test, to look at different profiles and different weights and balance points, ultimately that will pay dividends down the line from finding a product that works for you, but also hopefully someone who can tell you why it's working for you as well is really, really key. But that is ultimately the only way to know for sure. Macro9, evening folks, received my new T150s and Mizuno wedges recently. They look lovely, but I'm still nursing the knee, so can't wait to get out with them. Thank you, great fitting. Well, I hope the knee recovers very, very soon. I hope you get out before the autumn kicks in. It gets cold and miserable and dark, but I think there's still a few weeks yet, so get their knee well soon and get out on course. I'm curious as to what clubs would fit in between the last iron in the bag, which is a 5, and the driver. It's all about job role, and this will be the last one I'll do, so thank you for getting me through to 7 o'clock. If you're looking for height and stopping power and kind of carry into a green, then, well, actually, between 5-iron and driver, well, a reliable distance fairway club for one, and an alternative teeing club. So between driver and a 5-iron, it's going to be some form of, you'd think some form of fairway wood and potentially a hybrid. And depending on the gapping of your bag and distance you hit it, then you don't want to overfill it, but we want to make sure that each club does a reliable and useful job for you. So above the 5-iron, it's likely to be either one of the utility irons, as just to kind of put it down and forwards and in play, and maybe a kind of a running in play shot off the tee reliable club, or if you're looking for height, then a hybrid, and then a loft or fairway wood that makes it worth. It's about getting separation of distance and covering whether it's a higher flight and maximum carry or lower flight and more run out, and ultimately where you play will play a big factor in that, based on making it relevant to your game, clubs you're comfortable and confident with as well. That's really, really key for some irons more than hybrids and woods, but relevant to where you play and the shots that you need where you play regularly. Thank you very much for everyone for contributing. There have been so many questions today, and it's been fantastic. It's lovely to be back. So sadly, I will be away. Well, I say sadly, I'll be away next week. I won't be sad. I'll be somewhere nice with my wife. But we'll try and get someone to infill with Stuart next week. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get that organised for you. If not, we will both be back in a couple of weeks' time. It'll be just before, pretty much just before Ryder Cup. There'll be plenty to talk about. Thank you so much for helping out with all the questions, for feeding in the questions. Every week they're great, and it's such fun to test things out, to hear what you have to ask, and the knowledge you guys have is great. And if we can help you understand more about your game and about your equipment, then that's what we're here for. So thanks again for watching, and have a great week, and I will see you in a couple of weeks' time, and maybe some of the other guys next week too.